Hey, hi everyone. We'll just give a few minutes for people to enter, and we will be recording this, so if you have to leave a little bit early, no problem, and it can be shared to everyone afterwards. As my name indicates on my profile, my name is Fanny Smith. I'm the Player Development Manager with Athletics Canada. Joining me today is Sarah Black. She's a Pair Performance Manager. And we just wanted to take some time today to just review some of the logistics and pair event guidelines for the 2025 Canadian Track and Field Championships that will take place in Ottawa at the end of July. The guidelines are fairly similar to last year if you were with us in Montreal, with a few tweaks and changes that Sarah will review in the second part of the webinar. And so we will start with the logistics. If you have any questions as we go along, you can pop them into the chat, or we will have some time at the end to ask some questions, which sometimes is a little bit easier in case we answer them as we go along. So we'll start with the logistics part, please. So as I mentioned, the competition takes place in Ottawa. The competition starts on Wednesday, July 30th and runs through Sunday, August 3rd. And that will be for all events, including para. So last year was the first year that we had an event. We started competition on the Wednesday because we had to make room for the hammer at the venue. It had to be run alone. We realized that it wasn't as hard on the officials and allowed for a little bit of a more relaxed, I guess, for lack of a better word, schedule to extend it. And given the capacity of the venue as well, we will now be running Wednesday through Sunday. I expect that it's something that will continue moving forward to run a little bit longer. So it is a longer competition. And for those that are coming to be classified, we realize it's a long week, but that is the schedule. Competition Wednesday through Sunday for all of the events, and classification will be on Monday and Tuesday. You can find all of the information on our website, athletics.ca. If you go on that page, it'll be the first thing that's on the landing page, and you can click through that. But we'll put this link directly in the chat. Obviously, if you're not new to track and field, you know that the schedule will go through quite a few changes before the start of the competition. We have registration deadline. I think this is a little bit later now, but sometime in mid-July, we'll have a registration deadline, entry deadline, and the schedule will be readjusted based on numbers. So please keep that in mind as you make travel plans. Again, on classification, the deadline is now closed for classification. If you are attending national championships, there are no eligibility or entry standards for para athletes, but you need to have a national classification. If this is unfamiliar to you, please email classification@athletics.ca, and I can answer some questions through that method. But classification will be available on July 28th and 29th, and athletes do have to be present on both days because the schedule could change, and will be available about 10 days before the start of the competition. So if you're making travel plans, please plan to be there on the first day of classification. There is an Ironman that's taking place that same weekend, so I wouldn't wait too long to make some hotel and travel reservations. Second page. So we do have a hotel with wheelchair accessible rooms that's located downtown. All the other hotel meets are closer to the airport. So it's in two different parts of Ottawa. And the accessible rooms that we have, so there's a block at the Homewood Suites and the Hilton Garden Inn downtown. And so there's 13 accessible rooms in the Homewood Suites and 7 in the Hilton Garden Inn. These are all king size rooms with a pull-out sofa. And we do have some rooms that are available early, starting on the 27th in Homewood Suites. if you're arriving for classification. And the booking instructions can be found in the section of the website under accommodation. When Sarah presents, I will make sure to summarize all of these and put these links in the chat so people can grab them at the end of the presentation. Transportation. So we do have fully wheelchair accessible shuttles that will run from those hotels with accessible wheelchair accessible rooms. So that's again from the Home Suite and the Hilton Garden Inn. Schedule is to be confirmed. So these are accessible shuttles with tie down opportunities, and there will be other shuttles that are running from the other hotels that can accommodate wheelchair users that don't need a tie down and can transfer. So you don't have to stay at the Homewood Suite, but if you are looking for a shuttle with tie down service and fully accessible rooms, that is where we were able to secure a block. Additional meet hotels, like I said, are near the airport, and we'll have shuttles running from there. There might be a couple accessible rooms if within each hotel, but there wasn't a specific block at those ones. We do encourage everyone to use the shuttle service if you are able, because there will be a limited number of parking spots. So the venue is the Terry Fox Track and Field Facility. If you're not familiar with that area, it's also a public beach, so we expect it to be pretty busy in the parking lot. So communication, I guess I said all the relevant information is on the championships website. That's where everything's updated live as we go through the championships. So please become familiar with all the different sections and refer to that website for updates. You can also join the Para Updates WhatsApp group. It's going to be a broadcast only. I will update major changes and updates only. So again, please refer to the website for information. I'll pop that link in the chat later. So major changes can be something like a complete change on a day of an event or a rerun of some kind. It could be a reminder around training times. Basically, anything that comes up over and over again, I will probably put in the WhatsApp to remind everyone. If I get asked 2 or 3 times, it means that more than one or 2 or 3 people are wondering. So we'll use it that way, but please don't kind of just use that for updated information. And I think that's all. So I'll pause here just so we can maybe take some questions if there is around logistics specifically. That was a bit of a rapid fire, because I think we'll spend some more time on the guidelines. These have been put in the newsletter. They're on the website. If you're not part of the Para Updates newsletter, certainly encourage you to sign up for that. You can put a question in the chat or raise your hand and I can unmute you if that's more accessible. I'll just give a few minutes for that. All right, we can always come back to, oh, oui, Richard. Let's see if I can unmute you. Vas-y, Richard.
Qui vont être disponibles, là, mettons, accessibles, là, parce que je vais enlever avec un athlète, puis les fauteuils de lancer, tout ça. Comme tu faisais là, tu faisais des AC Pass, là, je sais pas trop, AC Wheelchair Pass, là, pour le... Tu sais, tu avais comme des choses qui nous donnaient la possibilité, les entraîneurs, d'être dans la zone, là, puisqu'on avait du matériel.
Ta question, j'ai pas compris le début de la question, ça a coupé. Peux-tu recommencer ta question, s'il te plaît?
Oui, ben en fin de compte, au niveau du stationnement des personnes avec mobilité réduite, est-ce qu'il va y avoir des passes supplémentaires que tu peux avoir pour les entraîneurs qui arrivent avec du matériel, fauteuil roulant ou autre, là, pour la durée du week-end?
Okay. So Richard's question was asking if people are traveling, whether it's a coach or another athlete, if they're traveling and they want to, with equipment, and they want to park at the venue, if we would have accessible venue parking passes as we have had in previous events. And the answer is no. And the reason being is that at previous events, we did not have shuttles accessible. And so there won't be specifically designed accessible spots. However, if you need to pull into close to the venue to drop off your equipment, there certainly will be a drop-off zone to be able to do so and to drop off your athlete. However, there will not be specific passes. Donc, pour le répéter en français, on n'a pas des passes spécifiques pour Ottawa. Dans les années précédentes, on avait des passes certainement précises pour les personnes à mobilité réduite parce que nous n'avions pas de transport pour les personnes en fauteuil. Si vous avez besoin de déposer l'équipement aux athlètes, vous allez pouvoir avancer assez proche de la piste pour le faire. Cependant, il n'y aura pas des espaces. Il y en a quelques-unes, mais ce ne sera pas des espaces réservés. Il n'y aura pas des passes réservées.
Merci.
Yeah, pas de problème. Yeah, so if anybody has questions in French, si vous avez des questions en français, c'est juste de le demander. J'ai oublié de le dire au début. Any more questions on logistics? All right. Off to you.
All right, as Fanny mentioned, I'm Sarah Black. I'm the Para Performance Manager, and I'll be reviewing the Para Event Guidelines for the upcoming Canadian Championships. These guidelines are, as Fanny mentioned, very similar to last year with a few tweaks. Last year we had a bunch of changes after receiving a lot of feedback about previous championships and consulted many athletes, coaches, officials, stakeholders, and other NSOs on balancing inclusion and supporting the development of our sport, while also providing competitive opportunities for athletes on or nearing the performance pathway. And last year was a great success, so we're building off of the guidelines from last year. So the purpose of these guidelines is to support a viable and meaningful competition for para-athletes, giving them the opportunity to compete against their peers and creating full competitive fields wherever possible. And so this may include combining sport classes or integrating with Olympic stream athletes in order to provide meaningful competition for athletes. And we put together these guidelines to provide clarity to athletes, coaches, PTSOs, DSOs, officials, as well as the LOC on event selection, how athletes will be integrated, how athletes will be seated, and the progressions throughout the rounds, as well as how we determine final placings and award medals. So all athletes are required to meet the entry criteria for each event, including being a 2025 Athletics Canada member. There are no standards for the para events, even when they are integrated with Olympic stream events. However, athletes do need to be nationally classified. We do also allow foreign para athletes to participate. However, only Canadian citizens and athletes with permanent residency will be eligible to win a Canadian Championship medal. Recently, the IPC released the LA 2028 Paralympic Games program, and so our championships will align with that program, using similar disciplines to combine to create a paramedal event. So sport classes will be combined into 4 main categories: ambulatory track, ambulatory throws, seated throws, and wheelchair racing. And these categories will be represented at the championships to make up the paramedal events. So for example, Men's ambulatory javelin will combine all classifications eligible for ambulatory javelin. Men's seated discus, same thing. Women's wheelchair, 800 meters, same thing, and so on and so forth. To create more competitive opportunities for developing athletes, as well as trying to get full fields where possible, athletes can integrate into existing events where WPA point scores are available. So, for example, there's no men's T34 400 meters in the Paralympic Games, but since there's a T54 400, there will be a men's wheelchair 400 at the championships, so the T34 athlete could still enter that event. I'll go into more details about what the WPA points are and how they're calculated in a future slide. And then the Canadian Championship medals will be awarded to the top 3 finishers in each para-medal event. In the case of an event with fewer than 3 competitors, medals will still be awarded to each finisher in the top 3. I'm just going to skip forward and then I'll go back. So these are the para-medal events at the championships. So as I mentioned, there'll be an ambulatory, a wheelchair, and a seated for each of the disciplines, and there'll be combined classifications. There may be some events that won't be viable if there's no registrants. So for example, there wasn't a club throw for either gender in last year's championship, but we start with what we're offering, and then if events have to be canceled due to no entries, then that will be communicated. This year we are offering a universal relay. So for those of you who aren't aware, it's a mixed gender, mixed classification relay that starts with an athlete with a vision impairment and goes to an athlete with a limb deficiency, to an athlete with a neuromuscular or a neurocoordination impairment, to a wheelchair racer. And there must be 2 men and 2 women within the relay team. And so there'll be a national team entered, and we're looking to have other teams entered in it. And so if your PTSO has, the right combination and wants to enter a team, that's fantastic. If you have athletes or you are an athlete that wants to enter as an individual, we'll try to make up teams based on who's interested. So there is an expression of interest form that's been sent out in the newsletter, and Fanny will add it to the chat. But if you can't find it, you can just reach out to me directly as well at sarah.black@athletics.ca. And this will take place on the Sunday with all the other relays. So when we have multiple sport classes competing together, WPA points, or sometimes known as RASA, will be used to determine placings for the para events. It's a factor system that uses statistical modeling to map out trends for each event. And this compares performances across events and classifications. It takes into account the size of each class and the performance based on the depth of that class, so that the formula isn't super variable depending on new world records or new athletes entering that. The world's best score is around 1,000 points. So the closer an athlete is to that score, the more competitive they are in the world relatively. And so we've been using this. It's not a perfect system, but it creates the most equitable way to compare across classifications and event groups. We've used this system successfully for throws for probably over a decade, and recently introduced it on the track side 2 years ago with a lot of positive feedback. And this is because athletes are being scored based on where they would be in the rest of the world compared to their competitors in the same sport classes. So for example, when we compare a T51 and a T54 on time alone, more than likely that T54 athlete is going to be first past the post, based on the level of function they have versus being a more competitive athlete. And so we've kind of, the last 2 years, we've implemented it, and we've also kind of cross-checked it with where an athlete would be in the world rankings, and it comes out pretty consistent. So that will be how points will be calculated to determine progressions from semifinals and then also final placings. There are sometimes situations where an athlete will have the same point score. This most happens in some of the deeper classes where an athlete might score 0 WPA points. And so we do use a formula that essentially calculates how much one WPA point would be, and then divide that performance by that point. And that helps us determine the rank again without having having a tiebreak score. I will note that all of these results are calculated manually, and so when athletes are competing, it takes a little bit of time to calculate these scores, and so it might we require a little bit of patience getting those final placings and progressions. But we are aware that the faster we can do it, the better. And so we are working on ways to make that more efficient and streamlined. So for track events, athletes are going to be combined with others of the same sporting gender and based on the event category. So wheelchair racers and ambulatory. Wheelchair athletes, if there is a heat or semifinal, they'll be placed using a zigzag distribution. So trying to create 2 equitable heats. If the ambulatory athletes, so for the sprints, so 100, 200, and 400, ambulatory athletes are going to integrate their semifinals with the open qualifiers, and they'll be placed into those semifinals or races based on their seat time. So they'll all get meaningful competition opportunities racing against athletes of similar speeds. And then after that first round, athletes will be scored based on those WPA point scores. And then a relevant number of athletes will progress to the next round. So in wheelchair racing, the top 8 athletes based on their WPA point scores will progress to the final. For ambulatory, it will depend if those top athletes are a VI or T11 or T12, as they require 2 lanes, regardless of whether or not they use a guide. So that might influence the number of athletes who are in each heat or who progress through rounds. And I'll show you an example coming up. So here's an example of men's ambulatory 400 meters. So on the left here, we have the entries. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 para athletes. And you'll see on the right, there'll be certainly more than 3 semifinals in the open qualifiers. But this gives you an idea of how the athletes have been distributed amongst the semifinals. So you can see here that they're seated based on time. And then based on their results, they get a RASA score, and then they're ranked accordingly across the 3 semifinals. And everyone, the top 7 athletes, because one of the top athletes is a T12 and requires 2 lanes, so only 7 athletes will progress. And those are indicated with a little q. If there are 9 lanes available, then that might allow an 8th athlete to come through, but that will be determined by the technical director.
There's not 9 lanes in Ottawa.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So only 7 will progress. And then this is the final. So allocated lanes, and then again scored based on RASA, and then the championship rank is based on who's closest, who has the highest points, and then going down from there. So you'll see that 975 points is first. That athlete wins gold in the men's paraambulatory 400. Next top score is 848. That's second and silver. And third place is 798 with a third place there. In jumps and throws, athletes are going to be combined with, again, the same sporting gender based on event category, such as ambulatory throws or ambulatory jumps or seated throws. And they'll compete against each other with final placings determined again by WPA point scores. And so here's an example where women's shot put is integrated with ambulatory or with Olympic stream athletes. So these athletes don't have a classification. And you'll see the separation here. Again, the point scores. So this is a good example here. This athlete got 912, which is higher than 842, but based on their classification, has a lower RASA score, and so came third. And then you'll see that the Olympic stream athletes are awarded their medals separately. So in the instance where depth of field for ambulatory track or throws is not viable for a competitive experience, para athletes might be integrated with Olympic stream athletes of the same age category and gender. And this might happen in qualifying rounds or finals, depending on the number of athletes in each event. Typically, para athletes will have a standalone event, especially in the throws if there's more than 5 competitors. But certain factors such as scheduling, entries, seed times, etc., will also be considered. So if there's 4 or less that in an ambulatory event, the para event might be integrated with the open. And if it's a final, the athletes will be placed in the same heat or wave, regardless of the seed times. And then similar to the example I just showed, final ranks and medals will be awarded separately from those Olympic stream athletes based on the WPA scores. It's important to note that if an event is integrated, it is still considered a para event from a national team selection standpoint. If a para medal event final is integrated within the qualifying round for a senior event, para athletes who qualify are eligible to progress to the next round, provided they meet any additional requirements. So if, for example, the 5,000 meter final is integrated with the open 5,000 meter qualifier, and that athlete hits the qualifying time to progress, they may progress into the open of semifinal. If an athlete chooses to compete in additional Olympic stream events for where they're eligible, depending on, Senior Open U20, they are still eligible for WPA and AC national rankings and records, but they won't be included in the rank for the championship para events, and so they can't win a para medal unless they're in that para event. Lots of people have been having questions about the 2025 WPA World Championships. Criteria and standards are coming out very shortly, so I won't be able to answer any questions about that today or how that will be integrated into the championships. But once that's out, feel free to reach out with any questions. And that's all I have. Any questions that have popped up in the chat, or if you want to put up your hand, I can answer them verbally as well.
Looks like we have another. Oh, Richard, une question ou non? J'allais justement ouvrir la possibilité de parler. Si tu veux parler, va mettre ta main. You just have to hit raise hands if you have a question, and I can allow you to speak, or you can put it in the chat. Donne-moi une minute avant de commencer à parler. OK, vas-y.
Ma question est, est-ce que vous avez les Rasa Points directement avec les live results ou il y aura deux opérations un peu comme l'année dernière?
Donc, Sarah a mentionné au début que c'était encore un processus manuel. Cependant, nous avons maintenant un fichier qui est automatisé. Donc, on espère que ça va aller un peu plus vite, mais il n'y a pas moyen de le faire live en même temps. Il faut faire tout le processus manuel d'une façon ou d'une autre. Donc, ça va prendre un petit peu de temps avant que les résultats soient sortis sur Athletics Live. So just to repeat that question in English, it was around whether the Rasa points would be live results. So the Rasa points, even though we have a more automated way of calculating them, it is still a manual process that we need to double check. And so for those that may not be familiar with live results, during the championship, during the event, Athletics Live is where you're going to be able to find the schedule progression. So you'll see what's live, you'll see the results live. For para events, it will show the final clock time or the final distance of an athlete. We, as a team with Athletics Canada and the technical team, have to take those results, put it through the calculation, and then re-enter the Rasas. And so you may see 1, 2, 3, and that may change once we do the Rasas. It's none of the timing systems have them integrated in Canada, so we still have to do a bit of a process. So we just ask for some patience. The other thing to note on results, and this goes for across the board in events, if a result is not showing up, it's often because there's a hold from the officials or the referees. Something has happened and they're holding the results. So it may not be because it's taking me forever to do the calculation. It may be because there was an infraction or there was a protest or something else that is happening. So I promise you we will do our best to get them out fast, but just ask for your patience a little bit on that process. I think there's a question in the chat, Sarah. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I can't see it on my shared screen.
Let's see. Is the universal relay open to T20 athletes?
Unfortunately, there isn't, it's not one of the classifications part of the relay. So we will use the WPA classification combinations, which,
So the relay is a 4x100.
yeah,
And the WTA has set the classifications that are eligible for the 100 and therefore the universal relay. So just to kind of repeat a point that Sarah mentioned earlier, it's important that athletes review the event guidelines and review the RASA points. Our athletes will be eligible to compete in events where there is a RASA point available. And that's often determined by the events that those classifications compete at the world stage. And so for T20s in particular, the events that will be available at national championships will be the 400 and the 800 and the 1500. And so on the track specifically. In throws, you're looking at shot put and long jump. Any other questions?
I'll just note, Fanny, for those that are interested in the relay, there is, when you go to the declaration of interest form or expression of interest form, it highlights the classes that are available. So there's some classes outside of T20 as well that aren't eligible. For example, short stature isn't part of it, and some of the classes within those impairment types aren't eligible either. The other thing with the universal relay is there needs to be a mix of, for lack of better words, higher functioning and lower functioning impairment groups. So you can have, for example, a T13 passing to a T47, passing to a T38, passing to a T54. So there's quite a few things that we got to come into play to align with the WPA rules. And that's why we're opening it up for an open registration to see how many viable teams can we create with the athletes that we have in Canada.
Any other questions? So of course, these are our Canadian Championship event guidelines, events within your provinces, provincial championships, etc. They don't follow these rules or these guidelines. And so this is specific for this event in Ottawa this summer. If there's no other questions, we'll go to our announcement on our next webinar as Sarah's just put up. I'll let you give more information on that.
So we've had a lot of interest in learning more about the nuances and supporting para-athletes in the weight room. And so our two national team strength coaches, Christian Proofer out of the West Hub and Luke Vanderheiden in the East Hub, are putting together a webinar on working with para-athletes in the gym. This will be 2 weeks' time, so Thursday, June 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time or 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll send out more information within the newsletter, including a registration link. It will be recorded if people aren't able to make it live. And it is open. It is open, so it's geared certainly more towards strength coaches and sport coaches. But if athletes want to attend, it is open for anyone interested in learning more about strength and conditioning for para athletes.
So one more question. If an athlete hasn't been classified, can they attend the Ottawa championships, the outdoor championships? Athletes need to be nationally classified to attend the Canadian Track and Field Championships. So if you are an athlete with physical impairment, that deadline closed earlier this week. If you miss that deadline, you can email me and we can see what we can do, but that information has been sent out multiple ways, multiple times. Athletes with intellectual impairments, you can email me at classification@athletics.ca, and I can walk through that classification process. It's a little bit different. Timing is of the essence though, because it can take at least a minimum of 6 weeks is what we suggest. If you're an athlete with a vision impairment, same thing. You need to email me as soon as possible, as it is a bit of a different process that is a little bit more lengthy as well. Also, we recommend that anybody attending Canadian Track and Field Championships have been training and competing at other events throughout the summer, and that this is not their first event that they're attending at the end of the summer. There's always opportunities in future years to come to Canadian Championships. So those are the requirements for para-athletes, classification, and the event guidelines that Sarah has laid out. So classification at athletics.ca, para at athletics.ca will always reach me if you have any further questions on that. So hopefully that has answered most of your questions. Take maybe a couple more minutes if there is any more. But if you have specific questions about your classification or your situation, then it's easier for me to answer directly over email. Otherwise, we hope to see you all in Ottawa. You know what we look like. You can see us walking around the track. If you have any questions during the event, we'll stop the recording. It doesn't look like we have any more questions coming through. Thanks for joining us. If there